Take for example our Western culture. In our culture, minor chords come off as more sad, unappealing, unsettling, scary, whereas major chords seem to come off as more happy, energetic, and uplifting. Take for example this D major chord. Change the sound there. You could hear that uplifting nature of the chord. Let's try another major chord. You might recognize this one when played individually, but when played together, now you can certainly feel the uplifting joyfulness of this tone, which is perhaps why MBC chose to employ this triad for the emotion that it conjures. Now let's contrast this with negative triad. This minor triad is supposed to give off a feeling of desperateness and negativity. Let's try another minor triad. Now this one is supposed to give off a feeling of defeat or mournfulness. You can picture a good person in a film being defeated to this. It's a tragic moment in the film, and you can feel the difference. Even the most subtle difference in even the most subtle change in sounds can alter the meaning of two tones drastically. Take for instance this C note played with various accompaniment. This first one is supposed to feel hopeless, give off a sound that's hopeless. Perhaps a hostage situation where you are held at gunpoint and you think you might not get out alive. Now I change one note and all of a sudden it's a feeling of tragedy. Imagine a baby being stillborn in a hospital room. It strikes tragedy into the hearts of the viewer and listener. Another change and all of a sudden we're in a mournful state. Imagine we are at a funeral. And just one more key change and all of a sudden it's a feeling of anguish and defeat. Perhaps a loved one just died. Now these are all sad minor tones, but these are often some of the most common tools used by composers because they create a tension that is eventually resolved. When it is resolved, this creates pleasure for the viewer, which is, of course, an emotion being conjured. Now, of course, many other factors come into play when hearing and processing these sounds. Take, for instance, the geographical or socio-cultural background of the listener. Even the tempo has a lot to do with what we are hearing. I'm going to contrast this major B major scale here now. If I change the tempo, there's still not much of a negative feeling because our ears are trained to hear that energetic upbeatness to a major scale. Now contrast that with this C melodic minor scale. Even a change of tempo still gives off that dark, scary feeling that minor chords tend to have, the dissonance in our Western ear. Now, of course, other areas of the globe do not feel this way. Some areas of the globe might consider this to be upbeat, and some do. Some cultures consider minor chords to be the happy, joyful aspect, and major chords to be that dissonant, awkward, scary sound that we consider the opposite. Harlem, New York City, the melting pot. What better place to talk about international relations than the one place in the world where every national culture is exposed to each other? Just as most of the world considers a laugh to represent prosperity, positivity, and happiness, and most of the world considers a scream to represent pain or threats or fear, do all cultures interpret music the same way? Music is found in every corner of the globe. A culture that has been devoid of music has never been discovered and thus has never existed. From the most solitary people to the most deserted lands to the largest, most bustling cities, music is everywhere. The idea that music is an international language may explain why an American pop band can travel to a land where people don't understand what they're saying and have more success than their home country. But do people with different socio-cultural and environmental circumstances feel similar emotions when listening to the same music? Lightbound and Spada illustrate that, as humans, we all speak one international language. The term interlanguage refers to the commonality in all human communication, both spoken and unspoken. Many languages have similar grammatical morphemes and syntax, but to transmit meaning, context, and inferred intent of the speaker also apply to understanding. This has a lot to do with pragmatics and how people can interpret compliments, recognize humor, or signify when a question is being asked. Take, for example, if you were visiting a foreign land. There are always a few phrases one must know in order to communicate in a different country. Where's the bathroom? My name is this. How do I get to the hotel? Etc. However, even if you do not know these phrases, humans have been known in time of need to be able to communicate with different cultures even without speaking. Our facial and bodily expressions have a lot to do with this. The three dimensions of semiosis are pragmatics, syntactics, and semantics. Pragmatics has to do with the verbal cues and utterances of a spoken language. It also has to do with the effects that a phrase has from its composer to its subject. Neumeier and Buehler illustrate that style choice is a more beneficial tool than changing the technical aspects of sound like tone, tempo, pitch, key, chords, etc. Some examples of style choice could be Romanticism, Classicism, Impressionism, Expressionism. Now, the way I interpret this is that different sounds have different meanings around the world. However, the emotions that people feel generally remain the same. This reminds me of learning about fairy tales and Twice Told Tales and their retellings around the world. Now, many cultures tell similar versions of the same fairy tale, but with different bits and pieces that apply culturally. However, the emotions always remain the same, or similar. So is music really the universal language? It's hard to say. Being a musician, I like to think so. One thing is for sure, is that music is one of the most universal languages we have.